It's midday in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Lagos. Good afternoon, and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. The transitional government in Mali announces immediate severance of diplomatic relations with Ukraine.
Suite à l'implication reconnue.
Following the recognized and acknowledged involvement of Ukraine in the leadership of Mali, the transitional government of Mali has decided on the following measures: the suspension of diplomatic relations between Mali and Ukraine.
In a related development, authorities in Senegal summons Ukrainian ambassador over Malian conflict comment. Protest enters day 5 in Nigeria as analysts describe President Tinubu's address following widespread demonstration against economic policies as empty.
The president has not conceded in any way whatsoever to the specific demands that people are making.
And Liberian government steps up effort to fight gender-based violence. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us, and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Let's begin in Mali, where the transitional government has announced immediate severance of diplomatic relations with Ukraine. In a statement, Malian authorities condemned comments made by Ukrainian officials which they claim promote terrorism in Mali. They also announced that they will notify the relevant judicial authorities about these remarks. Malian authorities are calling on the international community to respond. Augustine Coley has the details.
In a statement broadcast on national television ORTM, Malian authorities condemned comments made by the spokesperson for the Ukrainian intelligence service and the Ukrainian ambassador to Senegal regarding recent events in Tinzawa 10 in the north of Mali. According to the transitional authorities, these comments promote terrorism in the country. Consequently, Mali has decided to immediately sever diplomatic relations with Ukraine. This announcement was made by the Minister of State and Government spokesperson, Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga.
Suite à l'implication reconnue.
Following the recognized and acknowledged involvement of Ukraine in the leadership of Mali, the transitional government of Mali has decided on the following measures: the suspension of diplomatic relations between Mali and Ukraine. Ukraine has unfortunately entrusted its fate to individuals who confuse the international stage with a theatrical stage. Legal actions by the competent judicial authorities will be taken in response to statements made by the ambassador, which are considered acts of terrorism and support for terrorism.
Des actes de terrorisme et d'apologie du terrorisme.
The Malian authorities also call on the international community to take responsibility for Ukraine's actions.
Le Mali considère le soutien à l'Ukraine comme un soutien.
Mali calls on the international community to take responsibility and hold the Kremlin accountable for supporting terrorism in a global context. The situation requires strong unity and an urgent response to combat the growing threat.
Combattre ce fléau.
The diplomatic tension between Mali and Ukraine arose following statements by the head of the Ukrainian intelligence services expressing support for the separatist movement of the Permanent Strategic Framework.
Augustine Coley reporting there, staying in Mali regarding the removal of Abdoulaye Balo from detention 3 weeks ago. This chief warrant officer in the army, imprisoned in 2021 for an alleged attempted coup, was taken from his cell and moved to an unknown location. In a statement released this weekend, a group of lawyers expressed concern over his removal and demanded justice to uncover the truth in this matter. Ugiberika reports.
Chief Warrant Officer Abdoulaye Balo had been held at Camp 1 of the Bamako Gendarmerie. He was removed from his detention cell on the evening of July 12th and taken to an unknown destination. According to his relatives, the prosecutor was not informed of this nighttime transfer, which they claim constitutes an aggravated kidnapping offense. Last May, the army officer raised the alarm about the disappearance under similar circumstances of his co-detainee, Colonel Kasum Koita, who was also accused of the same charges. To date, his relatives say they have received no information about him and have been unable to have any direct or indirect contact with him. In a statement released this weekend, a group of lawyers expressed concern over Balo's removal, which they say falls outside any judicial framework. They have called for the case to be brought before the court so that the truth can come to light. They urged a strict respect for the independence of the judiciary and Mali's commitment against kidnappings and torture, while calling on the Minister of Justice to intervene. In addition to the two army officers, Dr. Kalilu Tumbia, the former Secretary General of the Presidency under Ba Njau, and 3 other defendants are also in custody over the same case. They have been awaiting trial for 3 years.
Ogaberika filed a report in a related development. Another diplomatic row is brewing as Senegal's Minister of African Integration and Foreign Affairs summoned the Ukrainian ambassador to Dakar, Yuri Pivarov, reminding him of his duties of discretion, restraint, and non-interference. This action was prompted by the ambassador's support expressed in a Facebook post for a terrorist attack against the Malian armed forces in Tinzoatene on July 25 and 27, 2024. The attack was carried out by Tuareg rebels and members of the Support Group for Islam and Muslims, JNIM. The Senegalese government emphasized its rejection of terrorism and its unwillingness to allow any expression that could be seen as endorsing terrorism, especially actions to stabilize Mali, a neighboring country. Senegal reiterated its unwavering solidarity with Mali and its opposition to allowing media propaganda related to the conflict on its soil. The Ukrainian side did not comment on the summons, but the video in question has been deleted. Senegal also reaffirmed its position of constructive neutrality in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, urging both parties to seek peaceful resolutions.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's take you now to Niger, where the military leader, General Abdurrahman Chani, has once again accused France of attempting to destabilize the country through Benin following the expulsion of French troops engaged in counter-terrorism efforts. In a recent interview marking Niger's independence anniversary, Chani claimed that French intelligence agents removed from Niger have been relocated to Nigeria and Benin. He alleged these agents, along with elements of the Beninese armed forces, are involved in subversive activities. Niger's new government, which took power last July, has shifted its international alliances and accused neighboring Benin of harboring French bases, a claim both Benin and France deny. This has led to ongoing diplomatic tension and disputes with the region.
Cette volonté maladive de déstabiliser le Niger.
This sick desire to destabilize Niger has spread through the repositioning of all agents of the French DGSE, whom we chased out of our territory. They have been relocated to Nigeria and Benin to destabilize Niger through the use of groups of subversive agents dressed in civilian clothes and elements of the Beninese armed forces also dressed in civilian clothes. You know Thomas Golioso, who was the level 2 post chief here in Niamey and was initially the chief of Embassy Security, is an agent of the French intelligence service, as I mentioned.
Ce que j'ai dit, une évidence, d'accord.
Here's a brief overview of his background. He was born on July 7, 1964 in Paris. He holds a doctorate and pursued advanced studies in comparative analysis. He previously held a level 2 post in Niger and is not the only one in this field. Others, as we've explained, who came from the air base have ended up in places like Benin and Nigeria. In Thomas's case, which can be verified, he arrived in Nigeria in February, 7 years ago. He is currently in Abuja with various activities in Kaduna and Sokoto. We are monitoring him as well as other fugitives hiding in their state villas and ministers' residence in Abuja. We are keeping a close watch on them, and their destabilization plans will ultimately backfire. It is a certainty. We are aware of the malicious and malevolent nature of the French.
L'esprit mesquin malveillant des Français.
Nigerian military leader General Abdurrahman Chani speaking there. Now let's head over to Nigeria, where the protest against an end to bad governance has entered day 5. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu addressed Nigerians after days of widespread protests against his economic policies, expressing concern over the loss of lives and destruction of properties. In a televised speech, President Tinubu highlighted his administration's economic policies, including the removal of fuel subsidies and the abolition of multiple foreign exchange systems. Here is an excerpt of his speech.
I speak to you today with a heavy heart and sense of responsibility, aware of the turmoil and violent protests unleashed in some of our states. Notably, among the protesters were young Nigerians who desired a better and more progressive country where their dreams, hope, and personal aspiration will be fulfilled. I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states, the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protest will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died in the protest. We must stop further bloodshed, violence, and destruction. Under the circumstances, I hereby enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue, which I have always acceded to at the slightest opportunity.
Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu was speaking there, but let's now join Usman Umar in Abuja, who is on standby for a live update on the demonstrations. Well, Usman, what has been the reactions of Nigerians today regarding the president's address yesterday?
Well, Imo, thank you for having me. Of course, many Nigerians have been reacting to the president's speech, which was broadcast yesterday and repeated on many other platforms today. Of course, it's been mostly a lot of Nigerians still feel that the president did not actually respond to some of the demands, most of the demands actually of the protesters. But again, on the other hand, there are those who feel that yes, the president could not respond to the demands because there was no coherence even from the start as regards the group of people who are protesting, and there is also no coherence as regards the actual demands by the protesters, meaning that there was supposed to be a coordinated front and coordinated demands and action plans by the protesters. Nevertheless, a lot of people felt the president only rehashed what he has been telling Nigerians about his policies. He justified some of the decisions that he has taken, like the fuel subsidy removal and whatnot, and the also flotation of Naira. In fact, there are some opposition leaders like Alhaji Atiku Abubakar who had said that the president missed an opportunity to placate Nigerians, to reassure Nigerians that he actually meant well for them. Of course, you can't take that away from the fact that also that he is a leader of the opposition. But nevertheless, the substance of what he has said resonates with quite a lot of other people and other groups across the country.
What is the situation around the country as the protest enters day 5?
All right, the situation around most cities around Nigeria, talking about Abuja, then Lagos and Port Harcourt. Of course, for Abuja, where I am today, it will appear like the protest is actually losing its steam compared to the first day of the outing, because as of today, if you come out and you're moving around Abuja, particularly on the major roads, it will appear as though nothing is actually happening. But except for some reports of some hoodlums who tried to, come out on the street to attack some people around Apo area. Then, of course, there were also reports of police throwing tear gas at protesters who had gathered outside of the gate of the approved location for the protest, which is the Moshood Abiola National Stadium. So generally, the day 5 of the protest is way more peaceful for now than of previous days in the past. So generally, we can say that there is some sense of return to calm after those very turbulent days of the protest in day 1 and day 2, particularly speaking.
Indeed, many thanks. It's Badamara Day in Abuja bringing us live update on the day 5 protests and bad governance in Nigeria. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The transitional government in Mali announces immediate severance of diplomatic relations with Ukraine. In a related development, authorities in Senegal summons Ukrainian ambassador over Malian conflict comment. Protest enters day 5 in Nigeria as analysts describe President Tinubu's address following widespread demonstration against economic policies as empty. We will bring you an interview on that. And still ahead, Liberian government steps up effort to fight gender-based violence. We also have the guest interview segment, the press review, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Well, don't forget you can listen to us live on wadr.org and do join our live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Now, the Liberian government is working with several civil society actors, especially the Women's NGO Secretariat, to enhance the fight against sexual and gender-based violence, or SGBV. Despite several policy reforms and massive awareness across the country, SGBV cases continue to pervade all societies of Liberia, something the new government is fighting to address, as you will hear in this report by WDR's Darlington Popper.
Deputy Gender Minister Anthony Laura Golokaya emphasized that the fight against sexual and gender-based violence, SGBV, cannot succeed without proper coordination and collaboration from all stakeholders. She urged civil society organizations, CSO, to actively participate in awareness-raising initiatives to help reduce SGBV cases.
We started to do an assessment of the safe homes, the one-stop centers, and even referral hospitals across the country. What we realized is that there is a huge gap. We cannot overemphasize the challenge that we face, and the ministry cannot do all. So we really looking forward to working with all of you to hopefully win the fight against gender-based violence. The ministry also has set up a legal unit.
In her remarks, SGBV coordinator Dr. Cynthia Blabo highlighted the critical role of the Ministry of Health in addressing SGBV cases. She stressed the importance of ensuring that safe homes are fully equipped to respond effectively to such cases.
One of the key things that I feel that we all have to work together to go along with this medical book is the training of our staff. We have seen the gap. They have the book, but the jargon to use. And I feel that Ministry of Health cannot do it all by themselves. Justice has its own role to play in that. The police has its own role to play in that. The pathology has their own role to play in that.
Many activists have pointed out that unless the government implements a coordinated approach to combat SGBV, the cases will continue to rise alarmingly across the country. For the Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
And some health news. Cote d'Ivoire's Ministry of Health has announced urgent measures to combat rising cases of dengue fever and monkeypox. In response to the alarming increase in infections, a monitoring committee convened to discuss strategies against these diseases which have recently affected the nation. Following their meeting, the committee issued a communique outlining key recommendations for the public to effectively combat dengue, malaria and pox. Health officials are urging vigilance as the rainy season exacerbates mosquito breeding, heightening the risk of dengue transmission. Echatiso has the details.
The Chief of Staff of the Ministry of Health, Charles Kofi, announced that a preventive plan had been developed to target mosquitoes that transmit dengue and malaria. This anti-vector initiative, which involves sensitization of the public, he said, were already underway.
In Abidjan, in the 33 districts, the anti-vector control efforts have started and being intensified. The population should expect the passage of vehicles and drones that will spray insecticides to combat diseases such as dengue and malaria.
Regarding monkeypox, health authorities reassure the public that there is no epidemic.
In relation to monkeypox, we would like to assure the public that there is no epidemic. They should report any cases and symptoms immediately. It is advised not to overlook the potential for widespread contamination. Everyone is recommended to follow guidelines for controlling the spread of the disease.
However, Charles Kofi urged the public to avoid handling wild animals. The Ivorian Ministry of Health has advised in the event of a fever or skin rash, people should visit the nearest health centers as soon as possible. The communique further re-emphasized that treatment for dengue and malaria in the public sector remains free of charge.
Attached to file that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let us back to Abuja as we join us tomorrow for the newspaper review.
Welcome to the press review segment. We start with the leadership newspaper leading with this story. Protesters to Tinubu, your speech failed to address our demands. With riders to the story says protest continues as civil society organizations urge dialogue. Don't truncate our democracy, Kachuku warns. Sanwo-Olu hails legislators and Lagosians for rejecting anarchy. Why protest is peaceful in Niger Delta, ex-agitators are saying. IBB, that is Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, former military president of Nigeria, disowns ex-account endorsing military rule. Northerners, architects of own problems. This is coming from a former senator from the region, Sheikh Husani. Before we take leave of the leadership newspaper, let's take a look at a raft of other stories. 120 reps reject calls for carries removal. Point of sale takes over cash dispensing services. CBN raises import duty rate to 1.618.7 to $1. This is, of course, over the weekend. The Naira fell again further against the US dollar to 1,618 Naira to $1. The Tigress, this is sport, make it to Olympics quarterfinals. Of course, the girls are doing us proud there in France. Last paper for consideration today is Daily Independent, which also is leading with a response to the president's national broadcast. Tinubu draws flag after broadcast on #End Bad Governance protest. You have a couple of riders there. Speech, Holo, failed to address hardship of Nigerians. This is coming from Atiku Abubakar, presidential candidate of the opposition party, People's Democratic Party. Speech didn't address crackdown on protesters, says Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, and investigate mass murder of peaceful protesters. Borishade tells Tinubu that's another member of the People's Democratic Party. This is the much we have for you on today's edition of Press Review. It's back to you in the studios.
Usman Omaro there with the Press Review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, we remain in Nigeria as demonstrations in the country is in its fifth day, despite a speech by President Bola Tinubu, which was heavily criticized by analysts. For many, the president fell short of addressing the demands of the protesters. Our guest today is Samaila Musa, public affairs analyst, who says the president made some points that are worth considering. He also has a message for those still interested in protesting.
So looking at it holistically, I think the president has made some powerful statement there to explain to people. And I think it's not just only when there's a protest that this kind of explanation should be coming up. People should know, because sometimes when you have a child who is hungry and is crying, he needs food. When food is not ready yet, but when you speak to him nicely, sometimes it just pacifies his anger and all that, and he feels happy. In fact, sometimes he forgets he's hungry because he has heard something nice from you. So there should be constant key explanation as to some of the things. I know governance is not done on the pages of newspapers, but of course, talking, sometimes it inspires you that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel when you keep hearing from your leader. And this is not just about the president alone. What are the governors doing? They were to represent their constituencies and say, look, I went to him last weekend. This is what people are saying. This one too said the same thing happened to me. They should be the one even calling for protest at the National Assembly, because they are there to represent the people. It's not just to come and take over a home in Abuja and relocate completely and neglect the people who should come and represent them. So they should be talking. If the presidency is saying some things they are not saying directly to the citizenry, they should be the one taking back the message to their constituents that look, yes, I got your message 2 weeks ago. And we have also channeled it through the National Assembly. We have called the attention of the president, and this is what the president is saying.
To speak to those who still have in mind to go out to protest despite the president's speech yesterday.
Yeah, so I'll say this to them: if there's no any other ulterior motive, if there's no political undertone to the protest, I think it's about time to down tools to say yes, let's wait. But if you feel there's a particular area in specific, perhaps the issue of subsidy, it's not too late to have a leadership to the protest. Let it be in written. You can even show the copy of the letter you submitted to press people to say this is our demand. If only this one is being able to be addressed, yes, everybody will go home to sleep. You understand? So there should be some kind of synergy in all the various groups doing this, taking leadership. This one is saying he's the leader, that one is saying, you understand what I'm saying? So
at that time, someone will tell you that there is no leadership.
There's no leadership. So there should be a synergy, and let your demands be central.
All right.
So that we know specifically what you are trying to say the president did not mention.
That was Samaila Musa speaking there with our correspondent in Abuja, Usman Umar. And in closing, here is Sport with Stanley Janko.
Hello there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Nigeria's national women's basketball team made history as they became the first African team, both men and women's basketball, to reach the quarterfinals of the Olympics. Nigeria secured the historic berth in Paris after beating Canada 79-70 in a thrilling match on Sunday to eliminate the Canadian side. Kalu was the standout player after scoring 21 of Nigeria's 79 points. Nigeria went into the Olympics hoping to improve on their Tokyo 2020 games, where they failed to secure a single victory. The Nigerians opened the Paris Games with a surprising victory against Australia, a first win in the Olympics in 20 years for the African nation. The West African country will play the defending Olympic champions US in the final quarterfinals on Wednesday. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And that's it on this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudu for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms: X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship health program, Well Body with Ogo Bierica. And this episode looks at weight management and eye care. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Gulf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.
Music radio created.
Bringing you the definition of contemporary radio.
9, 4, 9.
This is West Africa Democracy Radio.
Whoa. Thank you for listening.
Hello, West Africa. Hello, West Africa. I bring you good news.
Let's not waste any time, shall we?
Weekly Top News, your news and current affairs program, which comes up every Saturday, has been restructured to give you more in-depth analysis